Good afternoon. As always, I'll start with a quick synopsis of our last performance. I think we all had an understanding of what type of game we were going into, the gravity of it, and the style of play that was going to transpire. I think the National Football League knew that. I think that was one of the reasons why it became a primetime game. And so, I just appreciate the guys' ability to absorb that, to understand that, to prepare accordingly, to put a plan into action, whether it's schematics or fundamentals relative to the challenge. And no question, Baltimore has some unique challenges with their approach to attack in terms of their commitment to the run game, to the size of the people in their packages and things of that nature. I just thought our guys did a really good job of embracing that component of it. And conversely, on the other side of the ball, I think our offense did a really good job of working to possess it in an effort to minimize the attrition component on the other side. And so at the end of the day, we were able to win the line of scrimmage, I think, on both sides of the ball and do a better job of kind of controlling some of the attrition component of play that was a factor in our first meeting. Obviously, there's some things to get better at. There's some challenges environmentally in terms of playmaking and things of that nature, but that's always going to be the case. I really just think our guys' willingness to embrace the type of game it was going to be, to duly prepare and then deliver performance is what I'd like to acknowledge. And I just think this time of year, I think it's reasonable to expect those things to be more evident in our play, in everyone's play. I know that that's the agenda of guys like me, my peers, in terms of leading organizations and teams. The more you go through the process of preparing to play, the better that process should be. Your knowledge of the challenges that await, what a appropriate course of action should be in terms of meeting those challenges, and knowledge of your group individually and collectively in terms of how you divide your labor up and highlight the talents of the people within your group. And I think that that's reflected in how the game played out as well. We utilize guys like Leal and Mark Robinson increasingly so, maybe more than what we did at the early portions of the year. We know more about ourselves as a collective. We know more about them as an individual than we did at the early portions of the year. So it allows us to make good judgments in terms of how we divide the labor up in an effort to put our best team on the grass. And so those are some of the things that captured my attention in reviewing of the game tape. And really, as I mentioned, as you get into the season, you just want to reduplicate that or duplicate that every week with variables assigned toward a given opponent. And so that was last week. It was some good lessons learned from that perspective. And so now we got to apply those lessons to prep this week and getting ready for Cleveland. When you're getting ready for Cleveland, man, you got to respect their run game, and specifically Nick Chubb, man, and Kareem Hunt. They got to be at the top tandem in football, and they need no endorsement from me. Their tape and their resumes speak to that. We got to do a good job there. They won the attrition game last time we played. Fatigue became a factor as the game wore on. You can just look at the number of short yardage opportunities they had in the second half. I think they were in 3rd and 1 5 times in the second half. And that just kind of speaks to how the game is going. Not necessarily about third down or third down conversions, but it speaks to efficient run game that puts you in manageable third downs. If somebody's in 5 3rd and 1s and a half, you're not going to have a good half of play. You're not going to have a good half of play from a getting off the field perspective, time of possession perspective, any of those discussions. Because, again, every time they get that yard, they get a new set of downs. And so third down is a component of it, but what tees up those third downs, that attrition component of the game is going to be a big component. It always is when you're playing the Cleveland Browns and they have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. When they get in 3rd and 1 and 2, man, you're dead. They can run it, they can throw it, they can do whatever it is they want to do under those circumstances. And so that has our attention. Obviously, stepping into a stadium with Deshaun Watson has our attention, what he brings and getting a feel for him. We don't have a lot of exposure to him, obviously, and so the first in-stadium exposure is going to be a significant one for us, and understanding how to manage his talents and what it means in terms of how these two groups come together, his mobility, his ability to extend plays and make throws. We got to do a better job than we did last time with Cooper as a featured central guy. Last time it was the first time in the stadium with him, for example. And I think with each exposure, it's reasonable to expect you to be better. And so that's an agenda for us. On the other side of the ball, man, it always starts with 95. You can't allow him to wreck the game, and he's the type of guy that can wreck the game in an instant. You got to throw schematics at him. You got to put two people on him, particularly in one-dimensional moments. But you don't hang your hat there. Guys like him, they have a career of sack video against chips and tight end body positions and two people. They get that, but yet and still they're still dominant. I'm sure he's seen double teams all year, and still he has 15-plus sacks. In the very same ways that TJ deals with what he deals with being TJ and some of the other significant rushers, I just always appreciate that about them, their ability to deliver in spite of the schematic challenges that people put in front of them. They got quality people on the back end. Denzel Ward's playing really well. Delpit's playing really well. They use a lot of people and packages. Very familiar with Joe Woods, man. He and I have been associates for a long time. We worked together 20-plus years ago. He's a fundamentalist, a good coach. They'll be prepared. They'll play hard. They'll do fundamental things well. We got a lot to prepare for in terms of that. But for us, man, it's just that process that I opened it up with, and just talking about us identifying challenges relative to this matchup, us working our plan relative to those challenges, and then dividing the labor up and going and playing, and in doing it increasingly better as the road gets narrow. That's our challenge. That's everyone's challenge. From a health standpoint, feel good about the group. Miles Jack wasn't able to finish the game last week. We'll put him back in that same process and be optimistic about his inclusion. We'll see where the week leads us. James Pierre's in the concussion protocol. We'll follow that and see where that leads us. And Mika, with his ankle that he was able to go back into the game and finish, may limit him at the early portions of the week, but I don't know that any of us are overly concerned about the long-term prospects on that as we lean in toward play. Before I open up for questions, I'll say this about Damar Hamlin. Man, it's a really personal thing for me, being a Pittsburgher, and that young man being a Pittsburgher. I've known that guy probably since he was about 12. Just got a lot of respect and love for him as a human being, his commitment to the pursuit of his goals and dreams of doing what it is he's doing right now, which is playing in the NFL, and to watch him make personal decisions and make that a realization. It's just an honor to get to know young people like that. Had an opportunity to express that to him whenever I see him. We've played Buffalo each of the last 2 seasons, and he and I get to have a moment because it's just cool to not only appreciate these guys in terms of where they are now, but to know them since they were younger people, and to watch their maturation, their development, to watch them, earn what they've been chasing. It's just really a cool thing, and he's an example of that. I got a lot of love for that young man. We lifted him and that organization up in prayer. Reached out to Sean McDermott to lend whatever assistance I could. But I don't have a lot to add other than that. I just respect the fact that you guys appreciate how personal it is for me, not only for me, but just for all of us as people that thrive in this space. That's not obviously something that you ever want to see. I'll open it up for questions.
Mike, there's no handbook for situations such as that as a head coach. What do you do? What do you say in that situation?
You do what you think's best.
Mike, related to that, you said what you think's best. What kind of conversations are players coming to you with as far as safety?
I haven't seen any players. It's Tuesday, players' day off. And so that's just where we are. Anybody got any questions regarding this week's matchup?
Mike, what have you, over the course of the season, what have you seen change of your team? Have you seen any kind of change at all going from 2-6, 3-7 to where you guys are now?
In us?
Yeah.
Yes. But I don't know that it's anything that's mystical or earth-shattering in any way. I just think you have to display a certain amount of resolve individually and collectively in an effort to have the type of focus that's required to work every day, to get better every day, to repeat the cycle that is preparation, regardless of what's transpired, good and bad, in an effort to increase your chances of winning with each opportunity, to improve your level of play with each opportunity, to raise your floor with every opportunity, individually and collectively. And I know that that's kind of largely been our focus. If you just look at it from a high-level perspective, obviously there's a lot of individual things within that, but largely I just think it's, regardless of circumstance, coming to work every day, trying to make days individually productive, and then ultimately taking that spirit and that work into stadiums.
Mike, what is it about Marvin Leal's athleticism that allows you to use him like you have, filling in for TJ, moving him around like you did the other day?
He's one of those guys, man. Elite defensive lineman, and I almost pause before I say that because I don't want to refer to him as elite. But elite defensive linemen are usually power players who are uniquely athletic, or they're simply oversized athletes. They have hand-eye coordination of smaller people. They play catch. They punt balls with DBs and so forth. And Leal is that type of guy that kind of falls into that latter category. He doesn't realize that he's a lineman. You watch him on the practice field before practice begins. He's jacking around with the DBs. He's playing catch. He wants to display his hand-eye coordination and things of that nature. Within a practice setting, he runs more and longer and harder and faster than most D linemen. His pursuit of the ball and things that he likes to run. And so those are just some of the physical things that he has brought, and we're working to hone and develop and shape into a game that kind of makes him an attractive young prospect to include sometimes in packages and in game planning.
Mike, we've seen a ton of growth since the bye week specifically. Where have you seen the most growth, whether it's with an individual or maybe a unit since then?
I don't know that I'm even measuring it in that way. I'm just trying to put together a collective to meet this week's challenge. And so, there hadn't been a break in the action where you can assess it in that way. You get an opportunity to do it on a bye week. But we've been in hot circumstances. It's great, win that game, move to the next one. And so I hadn't assessed the totality of it. I acknowledge that it exists, but the component of it that has my attention is the component of it as it pertains to this week's work in this week's matchup.
Mike, how do you handle it with your team that there could be two games going on simultaneously that impact your playoff chances?
That happens every weekend. It's just less relevant to us in week 1 and 2. But every week when you kick off at 1, there's another game going on, and the outcome of that game could affect your positioning. I'm one to usually carry urgency from week 1 through the end so that I'm not living in that world that you suggest. I just think it's scarcity in our game. In football, you get 17 opportunities to state a case for yourself, and it's my job to continually educate our guys on the significance of that, not only now, but continually. And so we have. And so we acknowledge where we are. We acknowledge we had a lot to do with it. We're willing to lay in the bed that we've made. But more importantly than that, we're going to stay focused on the work that we have an opportunity to affect. And that's the work that we're living this week.
Like 2 weeks back-to-back must-win games. How have you seen some of the younger guys kind of handle that and rise to the occasion?
I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to it, to be quite honest with you. I'm more concerned with how I display, how I handle it. A lot of young players don't have a mode. They come into work trying to figure out what the mode is. And so those of us that are experienced, or those of us that lead, we better focus on displaying what it is we want from the young people as opposed to just trying to ascertain where they are.
How much thought do you put into that, of how you're going to emote your feelings of how
I do that every day of my professional life. Everything that I do professionally is intentional.
How similar, if at all, is the passing game now with Watson as opposed to what it was to Brissett? And how similar, if at all, are those two quarterbacks?
You know, I won't speak to the quarterbacks. Brissett is Brissett and Watson is Watson. But schematically, I don't see a lot of changes in what it is that they do. I've known Kevin for a long time, and he's got an approach to the ball that's tried and tested. He's been trained by quality people. He's from that Andy Reid tree, if you will. And so I know he has an agenda and a plan in which he likes to attack the schematic component of the game.
With your running back tandem, how do you know when it's time to give Najee a break and to give Jalen extended?
I think it's continual. It's something that that's fluid. It is not only a plan, but it's also based on what transpires in game. Long runs usually produce fatigue, et cetera. And so there's a hardcore plan, but we better be open to adapting and adjusting that plan based on what it is we see in game.
Like, you've been in this league quite a long time. When it comes to the playoff picture, would you rather clinch early, or you like your back against the wall in week 18?
Does it matter? Really? Does it matter? If there's a preference as it pertains to the playoffs, I'd simply prefer to be a team on the rise. And I just think a team that's playing better ball increasingly is a team that you want to be. All that other stuff, you just want in.
Mike, you mentioned after the game the improvement of the offensive line. What has led to that improvement?
Availability, probably be the top of the list. You know, a collective like that where cohesion is significant, not having a lot of lack of availability within the collective is significant for collective growth.
Mike, as part of that, is it communication the biggest element of that, being there every game with those five?
Verbal and nonverbal. You know, in the offensive line in close quarters, man, you know, there's verbal and nonverbal communications. This guys working in tandem and feeling one another. The continuity, the collective availability of those five guys, not only in terms of games, but just daily. That group hadn't missed a lot of practice either. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that as a central component of the development.
Mike, what made you comfortable with Mark Robinson to put him in that significant situation with
Who said that I was comfortable?
How do you feel he played?
You know, he's a guy that likes physical confrontation. That's the one component of his game that's never been in question. Growth and development in all other areas due to youth and lack of experience is. And so he's grown over the course of the season, and we've challenged him to get comfortable with professional football, and not only professional football, but we're talking about a guy who hadn't played a lot of linebacker, a guy who played running back in college. You guys know his story. And so there's a lot of growth that needs to transpire there in terms of the nuances of the position and a lot of the things that come with the position. To be blunt, you know, we were stepping into a game that was going to challenge him in a specific area, and that specific area was in line with his skill set. And so we let him play.
Mike, what you learned about this team over the course of the season, I know you have a lot of youth, especially on offense, but, you know, like in 2020, you had tons of schedule disruptions over COVID or whatever. Should that arise this week, do you feel like the core is maneuverable and light on its feet in that regard?
I hadn't thought a lot about it, to be honest with you. I'm not anticipating scheduling issues and things of that nature. it's Tuesday. These guys are coming in here on Wednesday. We got to lay a foundation for our plan. I think that's where I'm at.
With the decline in Kenny's picks, I mean, outside of the one against the Raiders, what is different the last 6-7 games in the first? Is it just experience? Is it just seeing it at that speed?
I think it's reasonable to expect a sharp, hard-working, talented guy to get better with each exposure, and particularly to do so rapidly at the initial stages of gaining experience.
Mike, the strategic game planning, the different packages you employ, Carolina, Raiders, Baltimore, is that the part of coaching you like beyond winning that you like best?
I love it. I think at the early portions of the season, man, this game could be described as checkers, man. At the latter portions of the season, as chess. And, you know, guys like me get a chance to earn our keep.
You brought up continuity of the offensive line. Are each of those individual guys maybe even hitting a higher ceiling than you anticipated? Like, is Cole a little bit better than when you thought you got him? Is Dan further down the track?
I don't know that I had any ceiling in terms of what I expected those guys to be. I think as a coach or a leader at times, you do them a disservice if you come into it with preconceived notions about a ceiling, so no.
Anyone else? All right.
Thanks, guys.